Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Brainwash Yourself podcast. My name is Annika.
I'm Callista.
And we are reporting to you live from the library, our home place of spiritual and esoteric study. And we are here to talk about a very special topic. On this podcast in general, we discuss all sorts of tips, tricks, ideas, concepts, ideologies, perspectives on how to reprogram the subconscious mind, shift your internal landscape, and therefore allow your external world to change as a result. So we're so glad you're here with us on the subship, the place where we dive deep into these ideas and tinker and make the shifts within our subconscious mind. And today we're going to be talking about the Tao Te Ching. So I'm going to let Callista introduce the Tao Te Ching, how we're going to go about discussing it in this episode. So thank you for being here. We're super excited.
Yes, I'm super excited. I'm putting away my notebook because I'm realizing I don't even really need it for this episode because it's going to be such a fun, chill, experiential one. That is the nature of the Tao. We've talked about it a little bit on our podcast before. I remember in our episode about neutrality and detachment, we referenced the Tao, and it is a ancient Chinese school of thought and kind of the main well-known text of this philosophy. It's a spiritual philosophy, is the Tao Te Ching. We have this version here, Annika's translation by Stephen Mitchell.
I actually need to shout out my friend Marta. Marta, thank you for letting me borrow your book and for inspiring this podcast, actually, because that's how we started talking about it.
Yes, thank you so much, Marta. And so it is almost like a collection of poems, and originally it's by Lao Tzu, which there is some mystery surrounding who that is and if it is one specific person, because it kind of translates to old master. So that could be like a metaphor for a collection of wisdom that has been passed down, or it could be a specific individual. But regardless, we talked in the neutrality and detachment episode about the very first poem, the very first, like they're all numbered. So number 1, and the format of this podcast episode is we are just gonna take turns reading a couple of these and then reflecting, and we definitely invite you to reflect as we read kind of what it evokes in you, because as the first poem we'll get into, this book is something that's just up for your interpretation, and it's not something that you can necessarily pin down and describe in a right and a wrong way to understand. Like, you kind of create your understanding for yourself. So the translation of this says, "The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The unnamable is the eternally real. Naming is the origin of all particular things. Free from desire, you realize the mystery. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. Yet the mystery and manifestations arise from the same source. This source is called darkness. Darkness within darkness, the gateway to all understanding." So I would love to know, Annika, what do you think that means?
Yeah. I love this. So what I think is so beautiful about this book and this particular section of it is that I think a lot of what we've covered in Brainwash Yourself thus far has been a little bit more of, you know, specifics, tips, tricks, like a little bit more into the manifestation side of life. And I love that this is a little bit more of a resting into the place of the like feminine place of the mystery and not knowing, and that anything that we can name, anything that we can talk about is not actually encompassing of that thing that we seek, which is kind of the eternal unity from which we came. And it's not something that can be conceptualized with the mind, and it's not something that can be put into a box or into words. So to me, this is describing that essence, that experience, that eternal power from which we came and to which we return, and that governs all things, is simply an experience that can't be talked about, an experience that can't be conceptualized, an experience that can't be put in any sort of box. And I just love that idea, because I feel like it can take you out of the mind into this place of peace where your mind doesn't have to be grasping at concepts or definitions. It can just kind of, like, this is something that when I read it puts me into complete peace and calmness, because there's nothing to reach for, there's nothing to understand, there's nothing to define. It's kind of like that Rumi poem that's like, I'll meet you in a field out beyond ideas of like wrongdoing, right doing, like in the place where nothing makes sense. It's like that's where the Tao lies. That's where creation lies. And I love that this is kind of encouraging one to trust that place, to trust that it's okay to rest in that place where nothing makes sense and where nothing is defined, and that is the place from which all life is organized. So we don't really have to be so in control, because it's organizing itself. That's kind of what I feel. And then I love when it says, caught in desire, you only see the manifestations, because we like to play a lot in Brainwash Yourself with the manifestations and what we're able to create, and what we're able to create via making changes in our subconscious mind and all this stuff. But like, and what doing that is so fun. I think it's like one of the joys of being on earth and awakening to your power more, as to your creative power. But if you get too caught up in the desire, you only see the manifestations, and you're not connected to that wholeness of the space that's beyond name, that's beyond manifestation, which brings true fulfillment. And then everything else can just be a fun little cherry on top of it all. And I love that it says the mystery and the manifestations, like, they arise from the same source. The source of darkness, darkness within darkness, the gateway to all understanding. And I think darkness is, to me, it feels like this place where one's not trying to gain understanding of anything, is the gateway to all understanding. Like, you will reach what you are seeking when you stop trying. So, yeah. How about you? Do you want me to find another one? Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. I'll find another one. I'm going to go to one of my faves. Okay. We're just going to go to a random one. This is not necessarily one of my faves. But the Tao is the center of the universe. A good man's treasure, a bad man's refuge. Honors can be bought with fine words. Respect can be won with good deeds, but the Tao is beyond all value and no one can achieve it. Thus, when a new leader is chosen, don't offer to help him with your wealth or your expertise. Offer instead to teach him about the Tao. Why do the ancient masters esteem the Tao? Because being one with the Tao, when you seek, you find, and when you make a mistake, you are forgiven. That is why everybody loves it.
Okay, super cool. I love it. The good man's treasure, the bad man's refuge. And something that is spoken about often in relation to the Tao is it is like water. And water always goes lower and lower and lower, first of all. And it's always going to find the bottom. And it's always going to follow the path of least resistance. And those aren't like, well, in our culture, modern American culture, sinking to the bottom, always following the path of least resistance is not held up as a virtue. When it comes to the Tao, there is less of the distinction, though, between what's virtuous. I feel like that's a huge theme, is like when you are categorizing and kind of like describing, naming, as they'll say, you're obscuring the ultimate truth. Like, you're kind of obscuring the Tao, which I think is really interesting because I do love that concept. I think it opens up a lot. There's always something to be learned, and there's never a reason to not experience some of these states of being that in other schools of thought might be kind of like demonized, and we want to avoid them, and we want to raise our frequency. Like in Christian thought, right? The saint goes to heaven, the sinner may go to hell in Christian thought, but it's like the Tao doesn't pick and choose like that. Like, you can always lean on the Tao. It doesn't matter who you are or what your character is, because it's always there to support anyone who is not resisting it, right? Who is following the path of least resistance. And so, like it says, the Tao is beyond all value. So, because being one with the Tao, when you seek, you find, right? It doesn't matter what you're seeking. And when you make a mistake, you are forgiven. It's never too late. Like, just get back in the stream, right? Like, it's always there and available to you. So I love that.
That's so beautiful. And I love so much that what you said, it's like you'll be forgiven, because it's not as if the Tao is judging, oh, you did something bad, now you have to do this to get back in line with, good fortune. Or now you did something good, you get rewarded a good gold star. It's like the stream is always there, and it's just the moment that you decide to lean into it, you can let it carry you. And it's not like far away from people who are doing certain things, and closer to people who are doing things that we've deemed good in whatever culture, which it's different across all cultures and societies, but rather available to everybody always, because it's the nature of life. Which I just wanted to read the back a little bit in case anybody hasn't heard of the Tao, and like we said, it can't officially be put into words, but I did like how it said on the back that, reading these can help potentially teach us how to work for the good with the effortless skill that comes from being in accord with the Tao, the basic principle of the universe. So like you said, like water, like it's a stream. and it's close to all life, no matter, nobody's in a category when it comes to the stream of life. Yeah.
Okay. Know the male, yet keep to the female. Receive the world in your arms. If you receive the world, the Tao will never leave you, and you will be like a little child. Know the white, yet keep to the black. Be a pattern for the world. If you are a pattern for the world, the Tao will be strong inside you, and there will be nothing you can't do. Know the personal, yet keep to the impersonal. Accept the world as it is. If you accept the world, the Tao will be luminous inside you, and you will return to your primal self. The world is formed from the void, like utensils from a block of wood. Yet the master knows the utensils, yet keeps to the block. Thus she can use all things.
Wow. Okay, I feel like this could be interpreted a million ways, but the way that I felt it was like, keep to the mystery, but know the manifestation. So like, stay plugged into that river, that stream, that Tao from which, that universal force, the source. Like when people talk about being plugged into source, like keep to that. That is the place that you are. That is what you are. And from there, you can be all things. From there, you can show up to any situation with right action. You can embody any tool or character that's necessary for the highest outcome of the moment, because you're not one thing. You're plugged into the source from which all things come, from which all things are born, and therefore you're infinite. Your potential is infinite. Your options for the action in the moment are infinite. And I really love that one. That one's beautiful. Okay. The best athlete wants his opponent at his best. The best general enters the mind of his enemy. The best businessman serves the communal good. The best leader follows the will of the people. All of them embody the virtue of non-competition. Not that they don't love to compete, but they do it in the spirit of play. In this, they are like children and in harmony with the Tao.
I love this. Okay, so to me, this is very much about detachment to outcomes, which I think is a major theme that we discuss on the podcast of Brainwash Yourself, and a major theme in Taoism and like Zen Buddhism and Buddhism, and just in general, I think like a secret to happiness in life. So when it comes to these examples, like this athlete, the highest value is not on winning. The businessman, the highest focus is not on the personal gain, right? The leader, it's not about controlling others or influencing others. So it kind of flips some concepts on their head a little bit, and it's like the way to be the best is to almost not care and not value like that outcome that you would think you would obtain by being the best, but really just to it says embody the virtue of non-competition. And I love that. And do it in the spirit of play. It's almost like you're prioritizing your equanimity and your detachment over the outcome. And I think that is a major lesson of Taoism in general, is like the virtue of minding your business and just accepting things as they are and being humble and like taking things as they come and like being just a part of the natural flow of how things are going to go. And I think just focusing on like showing up in the way that's asked of you. So the best athlete wants his opponent at his best because that is what is going to demand the best of him. So he's more interested in showing up and meeting a circumstance as best he can than he is in defeating his opponent. And I love that. I think that is just like such an admirable and beneficial mindset to cultivate.
And it shows that he's having fun with it too, because he's like more interested in his own up-leveling. Like he's like, okay, if there's someone even higher, I get to move into these new spaces, which it sounds like he enjoys, you know? It's not just about the black and white, oh, I have the W on the scoreboard, but he's actually enjoying playing the game.
I love it. Okay. When they lose their sense of awe, people turn to religion. When they no longer trust themselves, they begin to depend upon authority. Therefore, the master steps back so that people won't be confused. He teaches without a teaching so that people will have nothing to learn.
So cool. So cool. Yeah, I would say that if the Tao is like this flow of the universe that is unnameable and is undefinable, but when we rest in it, like all is understood without needing to have any understanding, then this idea that a master wouldn't step forth and over explain things or over express their authority, because that would cause people to latch onto these external things that do have definition and that do have maybe, you know, rules, ideas, philosophies, ideologies, or just the master in general. Like, they're external things that are manifestations. And so it feels like it's saying, like, getting too caught up into these things that are ultimately mental and physical keep people from true harmony with the Tao, true harmony with the universal flow. And when they lose their sense of awe, people turn to religion. Yeah, it's almost like someone who is deeply in awe, maybe deeply connected and in flow with the Tao, flowing with life, flowing with the universe, constantly in awe, constantly in connection to the divine. They don't need to look for anything external to try to get them somewhere or make things make sense, because without them even being able to explain it, it does all make sense and they are already there. And that when that gets lost, people may look for something external in the manifest world to bring them back home to that place that's beyond all understanding. And so I feel like it's saying a true master tries to allow you to fall back into that place without directing you to something that is definable at all.
Mm-hmm.
That's so cool.
Totally.
That's so interesting to contemplate, because obviously, like, we have a lot of practices that, like, we do that make us feel really connected. And I think it's kind of this idea that maybe just to not get too attached to any authority outside of yourself, and not too attached to rules or ideas. Well, you can still use things as tools along the journey. I mean, it's so up to individual interpretation, but I think this does express that it's accessible to anyone, anywhere, without anything outside of you. And that's really beautiful.
Yes, I think the best teacher is always going to turn you back to yourself. And I think that's what I value so highly in those who I do choose to turn to as my spiritual teachers, is that they're huge believers in that concept, and they're always emphasizing the fact that the answers are within me.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that idea that it's like, if I'm ever lost and confused and I'm turning to their authority, I do think that they do have that energy of, they're like, there's nothing over here, like, you better go back where you came from, because that's where you're gonna find what you're looking for.
100%.
Yeah.
Love that.
Mm-hmm.
These are both really beautiful, but I'll read this one. Okay. Act without doing, work without effort. Think of the small as large and the few as many. Confront the difficult while it is easy. Accomplish the great task by a series of small acts. The master never reaches for the great, thus she achieves greatness. When she runs into difficulty, she stops and gives herself to it. She doesn't cling to her own comfort, thus problems are no problem for her. Ugh, love that one.
So good.
So good.
This one, I mean, like, it really says it all. I think it is about humility, and it is about detachment. Again, you know, humility and detachment, I think, is a major theme. Also, right, okay, here's another major theme. The Tao is moving everywhere, all the time. So if you can release your resistance and you're trying to control, and you can sync up with that flow, it is very, very effortless, because you are actually being moved by the natural currents, like the natural energetic currents of the universe. So when it's saying act without doing, work without effort, I think that's what it means. Like, just be still, take away your attachments, your desires, your resistance, your fears, your efforts, and just see what arises. Just see what naturally happens, because it's not going to be nothing. It's going to be something. And I think that is the act without doing, work without effort. Think of the small as large and the few as many. I think that's just like about humility. Like, there's no external quantifiable characteristic of something that makes it more valuable than anything else, right? Like, every moment, like, no matter how small, like how few something is, it is going to be no different in spiritual value than the large and the many. Confront the difficult while it is still easy. Accomplish the great task by a series of small acts. This is like a productivity tip. It's like, okay, if you're procrastinating something and you're getting overwhelmed, break it into little chunks. Or, like, you know, do your assignment right when you get it, so that you're not like cramming and freaking out, pulling an all-nighter at the last minute. Is kind of like what I get, the vibe that I get. The master never reaches for the great, thus she achieves greatness. When she runs into a difficulty, she stops and gives herself to it. She doesn't cling to her own comfort, thus problems are no problem for her. Okay, we love this. This is like the humility and detachment anthem, right? Humility and detachment. I have faith that ironically, and it has to be genuine, so it truly is so ironic, but genuine humility and detachment, ironically, is the path to your glory and your desires and your success. I really believe that. So when she runs into a difficulty, she stops and gives herself to it. So this is about like acceptance of the moment and like letting go of resistance. Like it's not like, oh, I like easy, fun moments, so I willingly give myself to those moments. But when a difficulty arises, I'm like, oh my god, this sucks, like I hate this, I don't want to do this. Like it's kind of like that Buddhist idea of like attachment is the root of suffering. Like a lot of times what we think is suffering is actually just our thinking that it is suffering. It's kind of like the ugly, mundane, like, labor. If a mess is made and you have to clean it up and you didn't even make the mess and it's an inconvenience and it's gonna cost, you all your money and set you back on your path, it's like approaching it like, you know what, I am gonna embrace cleaning this up, being of service, taking responsibility for something that's not my fault, being broke, struggling, and not having what I want. And when you can embrace things like that, a lot of the suffering and anxiety of life dissolves. So I think that that's why it says, like, when the master runs into a difficulty, she stops and gives herself to it, because a master will have cultivated that mindset. She doesn't cling to her own comfort, thus problems are no problem for her. So it's like, if you are not clinging to your own comfort, then when discomfort comes, it's like, who cares? It's all the same to you. Like, you're just here to show up. Like, I'm here to show up for the comfort, for the discomfort. So you can, like, meet things as they are. You're not going to run and hide. So I love this one. This is like a manual.
That's like a life on earth manual. Yeah. Right there. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Nothing in the world is as soft and yielding as water. Yet for dissolving the hard and inflexible, nothing can surpass it. The soft overcomes the hard. The gentle overcomes the rigid. Everyone knows this is true, but few can put it into practice. Therefore, the master remains serene in the midst of sorrow. Evil cannot enter his heart. Because he has given up helping, he is people's greatest help. True words seem paradoxical.
Okay. This is also one of my faves. This is a great secret of life right here, in my opinion, because it is the difference between power and force. Like, water is not forceful. It is soft and it is yielding. Yet it can soften and mold all things. Like, water is what turns rocks into sand, and as it says, it can dissolve the hard and inflexible. And so I feel like the way that this expresses itself in life is when something, a situation, a person, an energy comes, hard and inflexibly towards you. If one can be like water, not only can it not disturb you and your own peace, but often it will make the inflexible flexible. And this can be directly witnessed. For example, if someone comes at you with an aggressive energy and you respond flexibly like water, you can often watch the energy in real time as the soft overcomes the hard, the gentle overcomes the rigid. Because if you've ever thought of or been in a situation where this has happened, or if not, try it. It's super interesting how if you don't get caught up in the emotional reactivity of someone else and you respond from a calm, neutral space of, grace, of flexibility, of softness, watching how it can instantly, what's it called when it's like disarm somebody almost, and then it can cause someone to relax into their own softness, and it's almost like they have nothing to bounce off of anymore. And I think that situation really shows how softness and flexibility really is a superpower, even though it seems like the less noticeable of the two expressions. And it's so beautiful to be able to not be reactive to the material world, to what's happening around you. I mean, Callista and I have talked about this before, that almost it doesn't matter which side of reactivity you're on, whether it is this side of being really negatively reactive to someone or something or someone, or being really positive in your reaction to something or someone. Both are like on this end of the scale that's excited. Whereas I feel like this element of water and the quality of water is just in the middle. It's like, it doesn't matter if it's good, it doesn't matter if it's bad. It's actually neither, and you just gracefully flow around it. I love that it says, therefore the master has given up helping, so he is actually people's greatest help. And I think we've all witnessed this before too, and we're trying to help someone, we're trying to change someone, but it almost doesn't even work until you stop trying to help and you stop trying to change. You're just flowing, and by being, you're able to finally help others. People are finally able to receive the goodness from you, the codes from you. This is just such a beautiful way to move through life, because it's not, I think, necessarily how we're taught to be. I think we're often taught to be forceful to get what we want, to go where we need to go, to take no SHIT from anybody, and not let yourself be walked all over, all of these things. But it's really like your greatest, I think in human life, the greatest defense can be softness. And this is, I think, my favorite line, that the master remains serene in the midst of sorrow, because like we said in the last portion, there are no problems. There is no attachment or conception of positivity and of negativity, and nothing can take away your softness. Nothing can take away your flexibility. And in the end, it's the greatest gift, I think, to oneself. You become one with the force that nothing can surpass, and that can dissolve all that is hard and inflexible, and that can go anywhere and never be stagnant, because you are so flexible in complete and total flow. They talk about athletes being in flow. That's almost like a manifestation of someone being at one with the Tao. They're in the flow. They see things before they're about to happen. They move in the way before anybody else sees the way to move is. And most of them talk about the fact that there's no thought. There's oftentimes no calculation. It's like a thoughtless space where they're tapped into something greater, a greater wisdom.
Yeah, it also reminds me of like what we've spoken about, like it doesn't matter what side you're on, but like to be emotionally provoked is to have lost. Like it's not about being right and wrong. It's about being detached and being okay with being misunderstood and seeming inferior.
Yes. To be emotionally provoked is to have lost. I love that. In harmony with the Tao, the sky is clear and spacious. The earth is solid and full. All creatures flourish together, content with the way they are, endlessly repeating themselves, endlessly renewed. When man interferes with the Tao, the sky becomes filthy, the earth becomes depleted, the equilibrium crumbles, creatures become extinct. The master views the parts with compassion because he understands the whole. His constant practice is humility. He doesn't glitter like a jewel, but he lets himself be shaped by the Tao, as rugged and common as stone.
Love. Okay. I have like a fuzz. Okay, I think I just got it. So, in harmony with the Tao, the sky is clear and spacious, the earth is solid and full, all creatures flourish together, content with the way they are, endlessly repeating themselves and endlessly renewed. When man interferes with the Tao, I think by being self-conscious and insecure, right? Because that is how the creatures are flourishing, content with the way they are. And I feel like man is the one who can interfere with the Tao because we have this element of like self-consciousness and like insecurity. Sky becomes filthy, earth becomes depleted, equilibrium crumbles, and creatures become extinct. This is hilarious because this was written so long ago, you guys, and like this is like a prediction because we have creatures becoming extinct, pollution and everything, the equilibrium, right? It's basically explaining why. The master views the parts with compassion because he understands the whole. His constant practice is humility. He doesn't glitter like a jewel, but lets himself be shaped by the Tao as rugged and common as a stone. So, from the perspective of the master, how could I even claim to see things from that perspective? I don't know, but I'll just pretend. So, he understands the whole. So he understands what's going on here. And he sees it happening. But he views the parts with compassion. So even as he sees, right, the master is seeing people through their own self-consciousness and their own insecurity interfering with the Tao, and from some perspectives it could be seen as kind of like ruining the world, like polluting the sky, depleting the resources, messing up the natural balance of things, killing everything around him. But it doesn't bother the master because the master, right, is humble. The master's like, I'm no better than that, and that is no worse than the former state of constant flourishing, endless repeating, endless renewal. It's like that's the glittering jewel. The filthy, depleted, crumbling, extinct earth is the rugged common stone. So the master can see all of this happening and is kind of just chilling. Is kind of just in the flow with it, like just like a stone. So yeah, I like that because it's like that stuff can kind of stress people out, get people in their heads, and that is kind of like to be emotionally provoked, you lost. Do you want to improve the world? I don't think it can be done. The world is sacred. It cannot be improved. If you tamper with it, you'll ruin it. If you treat it like an object, you'll lose it. There is a time for being ahead, a time for being behind, a time for being in motion, a time for being at rest, a time for being vigorous, a time for being exhausted, a time for being safe, and a time for being in danger. The master sees things as they are, without trying to control them. She lets them go their own way and resides at the center of the circle.
Wow. So this, to me, strikes a very similar chord to surrender. You know, surrender is something that's often talked about in different spiritual ideologies, communities, philosophies. And I think surrender is this idea that you give up trying to change things how they are, and you just let the universe guide you, and you just accept whatever is occurring in your life and in any situation, and put your trust in the idea that a force outside of you, or life itself, knows better than you. And from whatever small human perspective that you're in, where you might be, or I might be like, I don't like this situation from a objective point of view. I don't enjoy having this experience. I actually think things should be going this way instead of that way. When in reality, our human consciousness, I think we do have the capability to uplink to a grander perspective. You know, our intuition, I think, is the filtered guidance that comes through a part of us that can see the bigger picture. But I think surrender, and what the master knows, is that even if what's going on in any situation, according to our likes and our dislikes and our beliefs or our ideas about how our life should go, even if it doesn't align, we don't know better than life. Life is seeing everything as a whole. We're just one cell of this entire huge body, and maybe what we need to experience is something that we've been taught throughout our lives is something negative that you don't want to experience, but you have no idea why that might be happening to lead to that, to lead to this, so you can be here, so everything can pan out on a grander scale, so somebody across the world, across the galaxy can receive something for some, you know what I mean? It's like there is a massive organization that's going on, and life is lifing itself. We all think we're so in control, and oftentimes I think that's where a lot of the suffering comes from, because life is lifing itself and we're just along for the ride. And I think that's the idea of what the Tao is. It is the flow of life lifing itself, and the more that we can hop on that current and not label things as good or bad, and see things from the perspective of neutrality, the more we can just experience the multifaceted energies and experiences of life on Earth. And we do live in a place of polarity where there are things on all ends of this scale. And so I love that it says there's a time for everything. There's a time for being ahead. There's a time for being behind. This is key, because I think we've been talking a lot about how this month in particular, we've been feeling a little bit less, 2 steps ahead of the game, a little bit like we have everything planned out and everything's super put together, and we're just like slaying what, the Western world and capitalism would call being successful. And that's the thing, is there's a time for being ahead, and there's a time for being behind. There's a time for being in motion, a time for being at rest. There's a time for being vigorous. There's a time for being exhausted. How often do we all feel exhausted and wonder what's wrong with us? Maybe you're just in alignment with the Tao.
It reminds me of like in Care of the Soul, when Thomas More says depressed sounds like deep rest, and when you're depressed, that's what you need. And if you know a depressed person and they're just like laying in bed all day in their room in the dark, and like you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm so scared, I need to help them, and it's like you actually might be slowing the process because of your own resistance to just like how life is actually showing up. And that might actually be what that person needs, because they're so tired of keeping up a front and putting on a mask that you didn't even know what was behind it. And you didn't even know they felt that way. And they really need to, like, go into the cocoon and come back out, like, to start their new chapter. Mm-hmm. But it's like we think of that as so unhealthy, and we resist it so much. I just feel like that example always stuck with me.
I love that one too. Yeah, that's so perfect to describe this. And the last part, which I think is so interesting, there's a time for being safe and there's a time for being in danger. I feel like this just goes to show that no matter what the experience is, there might be a time for it. Because I think being in danger is something that, on a general consensus of human experience, we would label as bad. But maybe there's even a time, I mean, apparently there's even a time for that. And
like when the risk is worth it.
Yeah. Or just something has to happen because that is what's happening. And because it's almost like you just trust, oh, it's supposed to be happening because it's happening. There's no other explanation besides that. And that is ultimate trust. That is ultimate surrender. And it's happening no matter what. So we might as well not multiply our own suffering by thinking it's not supposed to be happening, or thinking that it's our fault, or et cetera, et cetera.
And at the practical level, it helps you stay resourced if you can think of every experience as something that's just asking you to show up, instead of some experiences are going to make you happy forever, some experiences are going to ruin your life. Like, it's just like when that happens, it kind of obscures the nuance and the detail of what's actually going on, and you put a lot of expectations on things and get confused when reality doesn't measure up, or you get triggered in your nervous system and it takes you away from your resources. And you know what? Even if that happens, that's what's supposed to be happening too.
This is true. Yeah, that is a mindset that just empowers you to show up the best as you can in any situation. Like, I remember one of the first, like, major yoga teachers I had, it was, like, always about what is life asking for you in this moment. And, like, we do the yoga so that the right action naturally arises from us in any situation. We don't, like, always try to have the right action so that then we're doing good, and, like, you know, it's like it's the natural arising of right action. And I feel like he would describe, we do yoga, I guess, so we're in alignment with the Tao, and then right action is produced naturally because we're just moving with the flow of life. And the master sees things as they are without trying to control them. That is so huge. I just think it's really, really funny that there's sometimes a greater perception, I think, in the Western world that we have more control than we do. And it's led to things like, the world can't be improved. If you tamper with it, you'll ruin it. Or if you treat it like an object, you'll lose it. And what is a lot of what's going on? She lets things go their own way and resides at the center of the circle. That's ultimate humility. You let life do its thing, and you offer yourself up as best as you can to it. And the hook there is, I think that's where there's the greatest peace. The greatest peace lies in that. In the surrender. In the releasing of control. I think sometimes the possibility of what can unfold when you just allow life to unfold is beyond our conception of what we could potentially dream for ourselves. And there's a possibility that it's all going to go that way anyway, because it's the way the Tao is flowing. So we might as well ride the wave. We'll do one more. Okay. Express yourself completely, then keep quiet. Be like the forces of nature. When it blows, there's only wind. When it rains, there's only rain. When the clouds pass, the sun shines through. If you open yourself to the Tao, you are at one with the Tao, and you can embody it completely. When you open yourself to insight, you are at one with insight, and you can use it completely. If you open yourself to loss, you are at one with loss, and you can accept it completely. Open yourself to the Tao, and then trust your natural responses, and everything will fall into place.
Okay, I love this. I think this is also about insecurity and self-consciousness, and I think that comes from the idea of duality, and we have these programmings of certain things, we don't want to accept them, and so we are ashamed of them, and so we don't express them. And I think it is common. And I think it's like something that does kind of cause these like little suffering blocks. Open yourself to the Tao, then trust your natural responses, and everything will fall into place. So it's kind of like one of those first ones we talked about, where when you stop trusting yourself, you turn to an authority. So turn back around, and the ultimate truth is within. That's something I love to believe. So if there's something, some sort of thought structure or energetic complex that is causing you to not trust your natural response, then that construct is false, right? Your natural response is always the truth, and it's gonna block your ability to flow with life and flow with the Tao if you don't express that. And I just think like guilt and shame is the main reason people don't. And insecurity and self-consciousness. And I think that this is good advice. Express yourself completely, then keep quiet. That's the other thing, is I think I see people, they're seeking for the validation. It's kind of another example of like when you don't trust yourself, you seek for the authority. It's like, am I up to par? Am I doing good? Am I doing what I should be? Am I okay? Am I good enough? And it's like, you are acting up for attention, like subconsciously, unconsciously, and it's like, don't do that. It's the same thing. Like, why do you want to get that information from outside of you when that's not where the source of truth exists? Like, it's just fruitless. You're just going to be spinning. Like, go back inside. So if there's something that's naturally coming up, express it. And then if something's not authentic to you, don't. Just stop. Just don't. It says everything will fall into place. I think that is true.
Yeah. Like whatever you're experiencing, embody it completely. Become one with it. I love that. And then when it's over, it's over.
Yeah, it's not going to last forever. That's the other thing. Is like sometimes I think we fear the intensity. This happens to me. I resist my emotions because I fear their intensity. But the more I do that, the longer I have to deal with them. And so it's always good to remember, like, it's like that cliche, like the only way out is through. If you're going through hell, keep going.
We hope this pod on the Tao inspired you to rest into the flow of life a little more than previously, and maybe trust in the flow of life a little bit more than before. The flow of life is so multifaceted.
I think there's such a beauty in like accepting yourself no matter what is going on, and like trusting that above all else, and valuing it just the same as anything else. No matter if, let's say, you are, really rich and fit and handsome and successful, that doesn't make you better. And if you identify as the opposite of that, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, that is the best thing you can do, is realize that your value just comes inherently. Like, there's nothing that could take it away, and just stop seeking it to be confirmed by someone else before you're willing to trust it yourself. Like, that's really not how it works. Like, don't go seeking for truth and for validation and expect to find it. Like, those are things that you turn inward for.
Yeah, because you are an expression of the eternal Tao, and there's no good or bad in the eyes of the Tao and the eyes of life itself. So thanks for being with us. This was a fun one. And if you have any interpretations or favorite sections of the Tao Te Ching, feel free to email us at brainwashyourselfpodcast@gmail.com. And let us know your thoughts, your feelings. We appreciate you being with us here today for a second video episode. And we'll be back in 2 weeks.
Yes. And we'll be back on YouTube in 1 month.
Sayonara.
Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. We love you guys.